The company dinner was held every December at a steakhouse on the east side of the city. White tablecloths, low lighting, the kind of restaurant where the menus don't list prices and the bread basket arrives warm. Hollis Distribution had been hosting this dinner for 22 years. Every department, every level, the whole company at one long table that took up the private room in the back. Frank Hollis had started the tradition when the company was 12 people and a fleet of 3 trucks, and he had never stopped it even after the company became something considerably larger. I had attended 11 of these dinners. I drove for Hollis. Had been driving for Hollis for 12 years. The regional routes, primarily, the ones that required someone who knew the clients by name and knew the loading docks by their quirks and could navigate the difference between what the manifest said and what the receiving manager actually needed when you arrived at 6 in the morning with a full truck and a tight window.
I was good at my job.
I did not say this often. People who are good at things that other people consider simple have learned that saying so tends to prompt a specific kind of response, and I had encountered that response enough times to have stopped inviting it. I was sitting near the middle of the table on the left side, between 2 warehouse supervisors I had known for years, when Derek Simmons, regional sales manager, with the company for 4 years, the kind of person who considered the company dinner an extension of his personal brand presentation, leaned forward and made a show of noticing me. He pointed. "Why is he even here?" he said, with the lightness of a person delivering a joke they are confident will land. He looked around the table for his audience. "He's just a driver." The table laughed. Not everyone, but enough that the sound filled the room, and enough that the people who didn't laugh also didn't speak, which in a room is often the same thing. I sat there. I did not look at Derek. I did not look at the people who were laughing. I looked at the table in front of me, and I felt, in the specific way that a person feels when something familiar happens, the particular weight of a moment I had been in many versions of before and had learned to simply absorb. At the head of the table, Frank Hollis set down his glass. He set it down slowly, with the deliberateness of someone who wants the gesture to be noticed. He stood up. The room went quiet. Not gradually. Completely. The way a room goes quiet when the person in it with the most authority decides that the conversation has reached a conclusion he intends to provide. What he said left every single person at that table absolutely speechless. Before I tell you what he said, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what country you are watching from. Now, let's begin. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 42 years old. And I want to tell you something about what it means to drive for a living before I tell you the rest of the story. I do not mean this as a defense of myself or as a correction of Derek Simmons's assessment. I mean it as a description of actual work, because I think most people who have not done it do not know what it involves and fill the gap with their imagination, which tends to produce something considerably simpler than the reality. I drive regional routes for a distribution company. This means I am responsible, on any given day, for a truck and its cargo and the clients waiting for that cargo and the schedule that governs when and how it arrives. It means knowing which receiving dock at which client location will take a truck my size and which will not. It means understanding that the manifest and the actual delivery are 2 different documents and that the space between them is where problems live. It means building relationships with the people on the receiving end, not because I am required to, but because a relationship means that when something goes wrong, which it does, you have a phone number that someone will actually answer. I had been doing this for 12 years at Hollis Distribution. In those 12 years, I had driven approximately 900,000 miles. I had worked with 47 regular clients across the regional territory. I had, in that time, learned the particular rhythms of each client, their busy seasons, their receiving preferences, the names of the dock managers, the coffee preferences of the night supervisor at the hospital supply account, who had been our largest single client for 8 of those 12 years. 6 months before the December dinner, that client had nearly left us. The situation began with a software error, a mismatch in the routing system that sent 2 critical shipments to the wrong distribution point. The shipments contained medical supplies that Mercy Regional Hospital had scheduled for delivery on a Monday morning in February, during a winter storm that had reduced the available driver pool to a fraction of its normal size. I was off the clock on Sunday evening when I heard about it. I heard about it the way I hear about most things at Hollis, from the dispatch supervisor, Kevin, who called me because he had run through his available options, and I was the next number he tried. He did not ask me to come in. He explained the situation and said he was still working through the list. I told him I would take it. My wife asked me, reasonably, whether I was sure, given the weather and the hour. I told her yes. I got in the truck. The drive took 4 hours instead of 2. I arrived at Mercy Regional at 11:30 at night, which is not when they expected a delivery, which meant the standard receiving dock was closed, and the receiving manager, a man named Carlos who I had known for 7 years, was not on site. I had his personal cell number. He was home with his family. He talked me through the emergency receiving protocol over the phone, which he had given me informally 2 years earlier, because he said he trusted me to know it. I unloaded and logged the full delivery by 2 in the morning. Carlos sent an email to our account manager the next day. The account manager forwarded it to the regional director. The regional director forwarded it to Frank Hollis. The email said that Mercy Regional would be renewing their contract. It said the renewal was, in significant part, due to the performance of the driver who had made the Sunday night delivery. Carlos had written one sentence about me specifically that I will not reproduce in full because it embarrasses me, but that ended with the words, "This is what a partner looks like." Frank Hollis had that email printed and kept it in the folder he brought to quarterly reviews. I know this because 3 months after the February delivery, he called me into his office and offered me a supervisor position. I sat across from him at his desk, and I thought about it for a genuine minute. Then I told him thank you, and that I was going to have to decline. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before. "Why?" he said. I told him the truth, that the road was where I did my best work, that I was good at it in a way I was not certain I would be good at supervising, and that I would rather be excellent at the thing I actually did than adequate at a thing I was being offered. He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right," he said, "but I want you to know the offer stands." I thanked him and went back to work. 3 months after that conversation was the December dinner. Frank Hollis was 65 years old and had built Hollis Distribution over 35 years from a single truck and a handshake contract with a regional grocery chain. He did not talk about this often. It was not a secret. Anyone who had done 10 minutes of research on the company's history knew it, but Frank was not someone who leaned on origin stories as a substitute for current performance. He expected the company to be what it was, not what it had come from. When he stood up at that dinner table, the room went quiet because the room understood that Frank did not stand up for small things. He stood for a moment without speaking, long enough that the silence became something with texture. Then he said, "I want to tell you all something about where this company came from." His voice was even, not angry, the specific tone of a person who has decided to provide information that the room does not have and that the room requires. 35 years ago, he said, I was a driver. 1 truck, 1 contract. I made deliveries 6 days a week, and I did it myself because I could not afford to pay anyone else. He looked around the table. The people who laughed at me in rooms like this one, and there were rooms like this one, and there was laughing, those people are not here tonight. This company is here tonight. Because a driver built it. The room was not moving. 6 months ago, Frank continued, we nearly lost the account that represents 22% of this company's regional revenue. He paused. Most of you in this room did not know that, because it was handled on a Sunday night in a snowstorm by one person who was off the clock and came in anyway, who drove 4 hours in conditions that most of you would have called a reason to wait until Monday, who knew the client's emergency receiving protocol because he had spent 7 years building a relationship with the man who runs their dock. He looked at me. The table looked at me. That account renewed, Frank said. The client's email to me specifically mentioned the driver who made that delivery. He set his hands flat on the table. I offered that driver a promotion 3 months ago. A supervisor role with a significant increase in compensation. A pause. He turned it down. He told me the road was where he did his best work and that he would rather be excellent at what he actually did than adequate at something he was being offered. He looked at Derek Simmons. Derek was very still. I have been in this business for 35 years, Frank said. I have never once, not once, had a client send me a personal email about a salesperson. He let that land. I have received 3 about Marcus. He picked up his glass. So when someone at this table asks why he's here, Frank said, "The answer is that he's here because he built a portion of what you all benefited from this year, and because I invited him, and because this dinner has always been for the people who actually do the work." He looked around the table one more time. "All of them," he said. He sat down. Derek Simmons did not speak again for the remainder of the dinner. Several people around the table found reasons to speak to me before the evening ended, to introduce themselves properly, to ask about the February delivery, to say things that were belated but genuine. I appreciated it without making much of it. That is not where my satisfaction came from. My satisfaction came from a much simpler place. Frank Hollis had spent 35 years building a company from the seat of a truck. He had done it the same way I did my work, by showing up, by knowing his clients, by being the person who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because the alternative was unacceptable. He had remembered what that was. And when someone at his table laughed at a driver, he had stood up. People who work in offices sometimes use the word just in front of the title of anyone whose work is physical or operational. Just a driver. Just a warehouse worker. Just a dispatcher. The word is small, and the damage it does is not. Here is what I know about the word just. The road I drove 6 months ago in a February snowstorm connected a truck full of medical supplies to a hospital that needed them. The relationship I had spent 7 years building with a dock manager named Carlos was the reason the receiving door opened at 11:30 at night. The 12 years of showing up and knowing my routes and answering my phone when Kevin called on a Sunday evening were the reason the company's largest account renewed. None of that is just anything. Frank Hollis knew this because he had done it himself. He stood up at a dinner table and said so in front of everyone. I did not need him to, but I am glad he did.